Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by Gerry Hamilton and CJ Vogel. Time for this week's edition of the Recruiting Breakdown. We'll talk about what we learned from the college football playoff and the national championship game as it relates to the Longhorns, and look back at Junior Day. Who does Texas lead for? And get into some specific prospects. But before we do that, Gerry, let's thank our sponsor here on the Recruiting Breakdown. That's our good friend, Mark Saunders.
Yeah, when it comes to protecting all your stuff, wouldn't it be great to have one place that protects it all? Well, I've got the same news I've had for 3 years. That's Mark Saunders. Here's some great news. Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders and Texas alum Mark Saunders serves the Austin and Round Rock area in the entire state of Texas. That means he's the only insurance agent you'll need. Everything from your home, car, boat, to your motorcycle, RV, and ATV, if you got one of those. Again, call Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders' office today, 512-218-8571. Our On Texas Football guarantees you'll be in great hands with Texas alum and On Texas Football friend Mark Saunders, 512-218-8571.
CJ, I want to start with you because what you wrote over at ontexasfootball.com on Tuesday morning inspired this topic for the show today. The college football playoff is done. The national championship game is now in our rearview mirror. After watching Indiana and Miami, their run to the title game and the title game, what, CJ, did you learn about Texas from a personnel standpoint, either for better or worse, about where they're headed and what they need to do to get back into the playoff?
Well, I think it's a lot of nuance with Indiana, right? A lot of those guys are much older. A lot of guys have played a lot of college football. I think for me, it's where Texas targeted positions where they needed depth, where they needed instant impact guys, and who they brought on, right? It was first team all conference ACC linebacker, first team all conference Hollywood Smothers and Raleek Brown. You go get the top wide receiver in the portal, and you're sitting there saying these are all top end talents at positions of dire need. But I can't help but sit there and say, did they do enough on the offensive line, right? It's January 20th when we're filming this, saying I don't know yet if the answer is there on the offensive line. And I watch both Indiana, who is as assignment sound I've ever seen a front five up front, and I see a team like Miami who is as physically imposing on the offensive line. And I see both of them have success running the football against really good defensive front sevens. And I'm still sitting here wondering if they did enough yet, right? There's still room here for Texas to go out there and make the move, but that should have been, in my eyes, the top priority before you go out and get all the tools and gadgets that make it pretty, like Cam Coleman and everybody else. So that's the big thing for me. They did find job everywhere else on their roster, but that offensive line, when you look at both of those teams, regardless of where they came from, high school, portal, whatever, they were physically imposing up front on both offensive lines, and I'm not sure Texas is there on January 20th just yet.
Yeah, Gerry, to CJ's point, when you look at the offensive lines, Miami and Indiana both had really good offensive lines. And the concern for Texas, we know we're coming off a year where the offensive line wasn't up to snuff for a good part of the year. But both of those teams, in Miami, I think had more top end talent on the defensive front than Indiana, but Indiana so much depth. But Gerry, when they decided to crank up the heat and not just, hey, let's just turn our pass rushers loose, but you're doing blitzes and stunts, even the best offensive lines, Gerry, we're having trouble with that kind of pressure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, if you ask me which roster would I rather have from last night at the University of Texas, I'll take Miami. And I know Indiana won the game, but I think it's different recruiting from an NIL perspective. You're attracting different players. And guys that you're not going to build a Indiana roster like at Texas. That's not going to happen in the NIL era. It's going to be different targets, different players. But so I that's what I look at. But I looked at that from an offensive line perspective. Both those teams were committed to the run all season long as well. So I think Miami, now Malago is a great player at right tackle. Like, that guy should play as long as he wants to in pro football. That guy's a tremendous football player. They built that. They have one portal transfer on Miami's offensive line. So there's still two different ways to do it. I think, but you look at Miami's, okay, that defensive front, that even though they didn't win the game, and I think you could argue a point where if the quarterback switched teams, the result would have switched, right? Even though Mendoza was perfect for the RPO system there at Indiana. But on the defensive front, that I just look at that defensive line. I look at that speed and physicality at linebacker. And I think Miami's good, not great in the secondary. I think they're good. But they got there by having a great front, I mean, well, part of the reason Indiana ran the ball so much last night in that game was they knew they couldn't pass pro early. They had made a switch at right tackle after the second series, I think it was. So they had no choice to be very committed to the run, else Mendoza might not have made it through the game. But if I look at those rosters and I'm looking at it from a recruiting perspective, I want what Miami has. I want physicality in the run game. I still want to have the biggest, best athletes because I think long-term in college football, I still think that's your winner long-term on an annual basis, taking nothing away from what Indiana did. But I think the one thing that you take from Indiana from a recruiting perspective, and this is, I think, the dangerous territory you can get in as you recruit at a higher level and a higher level and a higher level. They had a couple of guys on that defensive front last night that had Poona Ford's mentality, that had Byron Murphy's mentality. And you know what? Texas wouldn't have signed either one of those guys today out of high school. And you got to be careful of that if you get into cookie cutter molds in major conference football. Because I want Poona Ford on my team in a year. And I don't care if he's 5'11", he was still going to kick people's ass. Byron Murphy, 6 feet, he was still going to kick people's butt. It's a mentality, it's a physicality, and it's an understanding leverage, and you can still win at the highest level with a couple of undersized guys on your defensive front.
CJ, let's get to Junior Day and look at Texas in terms of recruiting for the 2027 recruiting cycle. Who do you feel like Texas leads for coming out of Junior Day?
Yeah, I'll start with one guy on the defensive side of the ball, Montre Jackson, a Lakeview Centennial up in Garland. That was my first time getting to see him in person. I told Jerry, I was like, wait, this guy's a little bit taller, a little bit lengthier than I thought. And, of course, he's a guy with a 10-300 meter in his back pocket. So, he's got what Texas wants as prerequisites as a cornerback. And then post-visit, he was very blunt. He said, Texas is my number one at the moment. Also in the running, Tennessee and Oklahoma right on Texas's heels, SMU, Texas A&M, and Duke, all in consideration at the moment for official visits later in the summer. But he made it very clear. Texas is the top school for him at the moment. He sat down with Will Muschamp, who made him feel like a priority. He has a long relationship with Mark Orfe. I know that offer came in that first week of January, but right now Texas is sitting in a great position for Montre Jackson. And I think, with what he said of wanting to run a 10-1 this year, Jerry, that's what Texas wants, length and speed on the outside.
Will Muschamp's going to look like he's running a 10-1 chasing this kid. That's my prediction. But I'll say this. You know what was impressive about Montre Jackson when we were sitting there listening to him, CJ and Jeff? How many times when a kid doesn't get an offer from a school he's really liked as early as he wanted, does it kind of turn him off? Montre, you could tell he's a mature thinker because he didn't have that kind of chip on the shoulder. Well, Texas offered me way after this school, and this school, so they're down my list for now. He's not approaching it that way. That's generally a pretty good sign for a school like Texas, who was a little later to offer him than some others. But again, you have to go through the process and recruit him through the official visits, because like the guys I'm about to talk about, while they may be leaning to Texas, these guys are continuing on with the process through the June officials.
Yeah, Jerry, along with guys that are maybe leaning towards Texas or that are sitting in a really good position for coming out of the Junior Day, did you notice anything different in terms of the volume of guys coming in, the caliber of guys coming in, any change in shift in strategy for the staff in this cycle?
Yeah, I definitely think it was a smaller group, CJ, than we've seen the last couple of years. Now, there was a big track meet, there's basketball, but I think it's also by design. I don't think – and look, it's also different because of the portal window. I mean, there's a lot going on for these coaches right now. They had Melvin Saina on campus the same day that they had a Junior Day. They're dealing with agents and things trying to get their own players signed that are returning to Texas and talking to agents all day. So it's a different feel from a timing perspective. But I definitely think we're going to see a little bit smaller high school class. I don't think it's going to be anything drastic, but smaller. So you're going to have less targets. You're going to have less guys that they work to get on campus as much. And I think that's the number one thing I saw, Jeff, is that if you're going to have some smaller classes, and naturally you're going to have less guys come on campus for a Junior Day. And I also think this too, the defensive staff is still evaluating guys.
Yeah.
Will Muschamp just got here. There's a different offer process now. And I think Will Muschamp is big on, Will Muschamp was on the road. We didn't see PK on the road. Muschamp flew out to California last week. He is an in-person evaluator of these guys, and he is just now getting a chance to do that with some of these kids in this class. So I think that's something we need to keep in mind as well, because it's definitely a different offer process. But Jeff, I want to add to what CJ said. That I think there's two offensive linemen Texas is doing really well with right now. It's Brian Swanson at South Oak Cliff, and it's Peyton Miller, the center from Anna. I think Texas probably leads for those two guys. If you maybe put my name on it, I think they lead for those guys. Does that mean they're going to sign them? It doesn't mean that. But I definitely think they lead for those guys. But, again, they're going to go through the official visit process. Now, could one of these three guys we talk about move a timeline up? Of course, but right now it doesn't feel likely. I think they want to take spring unofficials, take 2 or 3 June officials, then decide late June, early July. But I think Texas is doing well with those 2 in-state offensive linemen too.
CJ, Ty Knutson from Smithson Valley is a guy that's been on the radar. He's now got an offer from Texas. How do you feel about him being the potential quarterback take for Texas in the 27 cycle?
Yeah, I like the fit for Texas. And we've seen this kind of blueprint over multiple years of quarterback recruiting already with Steve Sarkisian, where you go big game hunting and then you find a guy from the area that, wants to play for Texas and you feel like has some toolsy traits that you could develop if you see fit, right? And I think with Knutson, that's exactly what it is. And Jared, we've talked about in other shows where quarterbacks get that chip on their shoulder and they're probably a better college quarterback than NFL prospect. I think with Knutson, he is, again, by definition, a gamer more so than a technically sound quarterback, which, hey, at the college level will play for you, right? So I think this is a fine, offer. I think it's a fine pursuit for the Longhorns. I think Knutson's very talented. I think he comes in, having talked to a few folks down in Smithson Valley, this is a guy that's very competitive. And this is a guy that I think wanted the Texas offer, right? Smithson Valley is more A&M centric, right? You go down there, there's a lot of Aggies down there in San Antonio, but more than anything, this was an offer he had been waiting for as well. And I'll tell you this, AJ Milwee made the trip down to see him in person last week, urged him to come on the visit, earn the offer, and now it looks like the two are headed in the right direction here. We'll see, obviously, what ends up happening, but that's something that I've taken a lot of note in, put a lot of stock into, and it sounds like Texas might have their 2027 quarterback here with Knutson. I'll also add, in San Antonio, AJ Milwee stopped by Piper High School to see 2028 athlete Carson Lacombe, a 3-sport star down there. He made it to junior day as well. He's one to watch. Heard a lot coming out of San Antonio about him as well.
I'll add to that. I'll add to what CJ said. You will never have to worry if Ty is a competitor if he picks Texas, because you're coming in behind KJ Lacey and Dia Bell.
Yep.
So you have a competitive mindset and spirit. That is for sure, if that happens for Texas.
Jerry, got one more prospect I want to talk about, but before we do that, let's one more time thank our sponsor for the recruiting breakdown. That's our good friend Mark Saunders.
Yep, Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders serves the Austin and Round Rock area and the entire state of Texas. That means he is your man for all your insurance needs, everything from your home, car, and boat to your motorcycle, RV, and ATV. Call Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders' office today, 512-218-8571. Here's our On Texas Football guarantee. With over 35 years of experience in the industry, you'll be in great hands with Texas alum Mark Saunders. Again, give him a call today, 512-218-8571 for all your insurance needs.
Jerry, Burns High School in South Carolina is one of those schools that's produced a lot of talent over the years. And looks like Jabbar Jalouk has a running back out of Burns that he likes quite a bit in this cycle.
Yeah, David Segar. It's an interesting prospect, David Segar the third at Burns, same school that produced Marcus Lattimore years and years and years ago, who's a pretty good player himself at running back. Segar is interesting because I've been tracking some guys that Jabbar Jalouk liked and offered at Florida. And this was one of the guys that popped up. Then I turned on his tape. I said, ooh, SEC running back. I said, just has that look about him. He is a 3-sport varsity letterman. Outside of football, it's wrestling and it's soccer. So he's got great feet, and he's got a lot of fight. He's got some leg drive, and he's got that ability to leverage people and get low and win leverage battles. I think he's an excellent running back prospect at 5'11", about 210. His father is on the coaching staff at Burns, and the reason you asked and we bring him up, Jabbar Jalouk stopped by the school last week. That's a pretty big development and they want to get him out for a visit to meet Steve Sarkisian. So that means that could end up moving towards an offer, in my estimation, because Jalouk goes, look, there's a lot of places he could go as a running back coach at Texas right out of the gate. one of those stops was burned in Duncan, South Carolina. So it's not, that's a place where it takes a few hours to get there, and you're burning almost a full day to see one kid and one running back, I should say. So that's telling to how much Jabbar Jalouk likes David Segara. And he had a great junior season, and now he's varsity wrestling. He'll be in varsity soccer. I think he's an excellent athlete. He also runs track over there, although that's not really his focus. But just one running back name to kind of sock away right now as we wait to see who Jalouk is going to offer. The only running back he's offered to date was Sir Roderick Baker at DeSoto. We'll see how many of these out-of-state guys he'd offered at Florida that he follows through and gets on campus and offers at Texas. But On Texas Football has their eye on Segara.
All right, Jerry, CJ, thank you guys for the knowledge and expertise as always. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for producing it. Thank you to our good friend Mark Saunders for sponsoring it. If you're not a member over to ontexasfootball.com, you still got time to get over to the site and take advantage of our Portal Madness special. Yes, the transfer portal has closed, but we've still got portal information, recruiting information, all kinds of information on the coming out of the 40 acres over to ontexasfootball.com. And first-time subscribers get your first month of access at ontexasfootball.com for just $1. Again, $1 for your first month of access at ontexasfootball.com for new subscribers. Get over to the site and take advantage right now. For Jerry, for CJ, for Matthew, for the entire On Texas Football staff, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until next time, welcome.